Hello Internet, I'm Zahn, and welcome to another series of drawing commentary videos. This particular session will be doing something a little bit different from the more recent drawing videos I've uploaded. Still sticking with the Sprite medium, I want to do something a little bit different from the challenge videos that have been posted recently. Those of you that have stopped by my Twitch streams when I'm doing the different drawing sessions have probably seen me working on the Modular Mecha series. It's something I started doing earlier this year as a different themed set of designs within the whole pixel sprite design work that I've been learning how to do. And the whole concept around the Modular Core series is exactly what it sounds like. They're mecha type designs, but the way I design them is in pieces and parts instead of just a single static image. And I thought it'd be interesting to go through the design process of drawing one from scratch and then also demonstrate how I use the different parts to sort of mix and match and create new designs. So this particular session will be twofold. The first part will be drawing the actual mecha design from scratch using the templating system I've set up, and then the second part will be doing the modular customization part. If we jump into our Photoshop window here, I've loaded up the main template for the mecha models, and I'll real quickly just break down how they work and how I've set this particular series up. Right here, we're looking at one of the first designs that I put together. This is the Brigandine. And like I mentioned before, the whole concept design is kind of a combination of mechanical and organic elements to create this mecha creature. I definitely think past media has influenced a lot of this design here. Things like video games or even anime series like Eva or Gundam have probably seeped into my subconscious as I've been drawing these. But to demonstrate the whole idea of the modular aspect, which isn't necessarily a unique concept, it's just the only thing that seemed appropriate to call this particular way of creating a design. When I draw these, like I mentioned before, I draw them in parts, and I do them in separate groups here. We're still working in Photoshop. The overall piece has a master folder, and then I draw the line work, the color assignment, and then the shading all in a series of sublayers in that main directory. To illustrate what I'm talking about here, if we were to hide all of the other parts of the design and then just uncollapse the head directory, the head directory has 3 layers in it. The first one would be the line work. The second one is the color assignment, and the third one is the shading. And the way I've just broken up all of the different subparts would be the head, the left arm, if we're looking at this head on, the upper body or core. The series was derived from the central body units, which are the core of the unit itself. The left leg, lower body, right leg, right arm. And the reason why I design these this way, as opposed to just drawing a completely static image from line work on one layer, is so that I could take the different series of parts and mix and match them, essentially. When I talk about the customization, I can go into that a little bit later. But it basically gives me the flexibility to, say, take the head unit from this particular model and drop it onto the core or the body from another one, bring in the arms from another one, and make a whole bunch of different permutations using all the parts. And, And as a result, I've created quite a few of these. I won't go through all of them here, But over on DA, where I post stuff for the Sprite series weekly, I've uploaded a couple from this series that are all unique sets. I haven't posted any of the mix and match stuff yet, but I have been tinkering around with it. What we'll do in the second part of the video is go through what the customization looks like. But first off, we'll go ahead and get started here. Taking a look, let's see. Looks like there's a shading layer missing on the right arm. Should probably fix that before we move on. Oh, no, looks like I just forgot to shade the claws. I'll have to figure out what happened there. This was one of the first ones I posted. It'd be interesting if the one I posted was missing shading here and here. Usually I QC things fairly well. Let's see if I can pull up the one that I posted. Yep. Looks like I need to update that image. Yeah, I'll do that here on this layer, that way I can at least have the updated version. I'll just resave it. I'm planning on doing a t-shirt or a hoodie print test for this particular design. So it would be good if I didn't have shading missing on the final product before I actually order it. All I really need to do is add in the texturing or shading on the claws and these things on the arms. And then that should do it for this one. What I do when I start doing a new one of these designs, I use the Brigandine model as the basic scale template. That way I know sort of roughly the size limitations and keep everything within a consistent format. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and drop that in as the base template while we're doing the line work for the new one. If we scroll down through the list of layers in the main template here, we've got 37 of these already organized, which means as of today I've drawn 37 unique mecha models here. What I've done to save myself the time and headache of having to reset up the directories each time I create a new one of these is I've created a template directory here. This folder has all the body parts and the layers with the clipping layers for shading ready to go. All I have to do is just duplicate them and rename the master folder, and then I don't have to do it from scratch every time. What we'll do is we'll duplicate this one and we're going to call it 38. And we activate the layer so it's ready to go. And I thought a little bit about how I wanted to do the actual design for this particular video. What I can do is get all the stuff in my other window ready here. Normally, when I do these designs, especially on stream, I have a couple different approaches when it comes to drawing new models in this particular series. I have a lot of concept sketches that I've done. Usually if I'm stuck waiting for something, or if I'm on a flight or traveling, I have a 4" by 4" notepad of sticky notes that I take with me. And if I have an idea that pops into my head, I'll sketch out the mecha concept and then just add it to the pile. Maybe I could take a picture of what that pile looks like on my desk, but there's quite literally dozens of mecha design concepts I've just come up with and then stuck in the pile. And sometimes when I'm on stream or working on these, I'll pull one out of the pile that I like and then I'll draw that, or I'll just go completely from scratch and freehand the whole thing. And I think for purposes here of this particular video, I'll go for drawing something from scratch and we'll see what we end up with. And that way I can kind of narrate the whole process for you guys and give some insight into some of the design process for these. But the first place I start whenever I'm working on a new one of these particular mecha models is I'll start with the central body, the core, which is going to drive how I design a lot of the appendages. It'll kind of dictate the shape of the head, and it's the central piece for all of these. When I do the different swap and customization models, I'll start with the core of whatever series, and then I'll bring all the other new customized parts in. Well, what we can do, we're not going to be tracing the proportions exactly from the bring-in. It's just a template that gives me kind of a rough working space for the dimensions that I'm going to be using. Just like we've done on the other sprites, the first thing I do for these is I rough in a primary for each part while trying to sort of kick around any designs, that ideas I might have, any kind of unique shapes. And there really is no structured process unless I'm following one of my concept sketches, where the actual end result is a little bit more specific since I've already drawn it out. For this particular one here, we're going to just wing it and come up with random designs and then put everything together and see how the final product looks. Since I've been doing these mecha designs, I have gotten the question from other people as far as where the design ideas or the inspiration, in quotes, for starting this particular design series, where it came from. The pixel sprite work I've been doing for the greater part of a year or so is fairly straightforward. It's mostly monsters and different types of creatures. I haven't really graduated to drawing people yet in the pixel sprite form. That is something I'm kind of working up to as I learn how to get better with the particular drawing style of using pixels. But for the mecha series, I've always been fascinated with different types of mecha in media. Like I mentioned before, things like Ava or Gundam have all been pretty interesting from a design perspective. And I may have mentioned this on one of these videos, maybe not. When I was first learning how to use Rhino, which is the main design software you guys see me using for things like the speed drawing videos and a lot of the two-dimensional quote-unquote graphic design. I say quote-unquote because I'm not an educated graphic designer. I basically learned all of my techniques for things in Rhino through trial and error and just messing around with the software and making it do what I want to do. But before I kind of started using Rhino for two-dimensional work, I used to do a lot of 3D modeling. I know I've mentioned that before. In addition to creating kind of organic, crude monster designs, which is not surprising, I'm sure, one thing I did do a lot of in Rhino is mecha design. And just like we're doing here when we have these kind of biomechanical mecha creations, using Rhino, I actually learned how to model more, I don't want to say blocky, but more actual mechanical looking pieces. And that was my main interest with the software for a really long time. I want to say that was one of the main things I was learning how to do before I sort of started switching over to the two-dimensional design aspect, and then sort of stuck with that for a long time. Since I talk about it every once in a while in these videos, I may have to just take some time to create a YouTube video where I go through my Rhino model archive, since I have all that here on this machine. I dig it up from time to time to look and see if I want to pull any old designs from the archives and repurpose them for either things like this with sprites or with the two-dimensional designs. That might be a fun thing to do. Maybe not as part of the annual retrospective, but maybe just sort of an in general look through past work. The 3D model stuff I did in Rhino was not polished by any means. The folks that work in modern CGI and things like video game companies or Pixar or what have you are miles, hundreds of miles beyond in level what I was making, but a lot of the design elements and ideas from that time kind of flow through into what I do now, so it's relevant. It's just not professional by any means. Some of my early Rhino models were literally just a bunch of 3D spheres connected together. But we'll see. That could be a topic for a future video. Is going through the old archives. Getting back to the core unit of the piece that we're working on here. If I hide the template in the back, I'll bring it back up when I move on. The detail work on the body or core, I think, is just about good to go. We have here sort of a kind of broad-shouldered central upper body. The head, it goes in this intersection here. The way I've designed the sort of layering for these is there's an under layer of material that the head or any other central parts are mounted on, and then that's what you see on the inner body and on the joints connecting the torso to the arms. The lower body will be down here, and then the legs will be attached to the lower body. But what we can do, the order of these that I usually draw in is body first, then the head, then the arm, then the lower body, then the limbs, arms, and legs. But what we can do, since we have everything set up here, is go for the head shape. And looking at the shape here, trying to do something a bit more tall and vertical as opposed to width-wise might be an interesting change. Looking at a lot of these finished concepts after doing all the color rendering, shading, and all that, it does seem like a lot of my mecha designs don't have necks. I have designed a few that have neck segments and the head kind of extends up here, but I don't know exactly where that came from. It's just been kind of a consistent thing that I've done on a lot of these, and it's kind of a stylistic choice more than anything else. Just like the two-dimensional designs, and I've talked through the free drawing process for a lot of these, there is no real complicated process. I'm here just kicking around ideas and working with whatever pops out. I'm not gonna claim it's anything more elaborate than that. But because we're working on different layers, to go back to the piece here, as I draw each section, what I'll frequently do just to make sure I'm centering everything and keeping everything perspective-wise consistent is I'll move things around since they're all on separate layers, which is another reason why this is a handy way to draw these particular types of designs. And that way, if I have to make changes to one of the layers, it doesn't mess with the other ones around it. I can do everything in the folder, and it makes working with these a lot easier. Problem is, because we're still working only at the outline and pixel level, I'm having to jump between the different directories and turn layers on and off in order to see what I'm doing. Fortunately, the head layer and the body layer are pretty close together in the main directory. So it's just a matter of toggling the visibility on and off. I think if we taper this to a bit more of an angle, this will look like a horn instead of just a big block. Another challenge that I run into every once in a while with these, especially if I'm just drawing them from scratch, is not duplicating something I've done before. What I'll frequently do, especially when I'm on stream, is I'll pull up the list of completed renders for these that I've done and just spot check what I'm currently working on against what I've done in the past. And if things look too similar, I can make alterations before I get to the end. For this one, we'll just see where it goes. I'm not entirely concerned with keeping things in line with what we've done so far. This is more just an illustration of how I do these. With the head, I think is good for now. I might have to move it around, and once we get the colors assigned, just if it looks like the outer line work is clipping too much into the torso, but we'll leave that for now. For the lower body, continuing on in a new layer, in a new subfolder, we're just going to work exactly in line with the one we've done now, and I should probably put my template back up so I can make sure I'm not getting out of control with the proportions of these things. And if we work within the boundaries of the upper layer, just for the rough kind of primary, I can go back and fix things in real time, especially if I start seeing things like this where the perspective isn't quite lining up. I just need to remember one thing that always, still to this day, causes problems every once in a while is I'll be working on an idea and forget that I'm on a different layer, and then when I start assigning color, I'll realize that I drew, let's say, this section right here on the leg layer instead of the lower body layer, or anything like that. I'll have to go back and fix to make sure I'm actually doing things on the right layer so that doesn't screw up all the coloring and shading. And I don't have a good enough knowledge of Photoshop to know if there's a way to set up limitations on the different layering. There might be a way to work with locking the different layers. That might be something I look into when I eventually upgrade this build and go to the more recent Creative Cloud, which I'm planning on doing hopefully before the new year. Because this ancient version of Photoshop CS, what is this, 4? Might be CS4? I've had for an eternity. And because I'm going to be forced to upgrade my system from Windows 7 to 10, I might as well jump into the more current versions of software for design, like Photoshop. I already purchased a new license for Sony Vegas, which I use to do my video editing, and the big one that I'll have to bite the bullet and do would be my license for Rhino. I think I mentioned it in one of the older videos, in one of the older commentary videos. The version of Rhinoceros that I use for my design work is an old student license I acquired years ago. And it works perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong with the version, but it can't be upgraded. And that particular version of the software only works with Microsoft Windows 7. It's one of the limitations of the student license, and for a long time that wasn't really a big deal. I'm perfectly fine working with the functionality of Windows 7. It's what I've done all my work on that you guys have seen for design and video purposes. And overall it does its job fine. Well, unfortunately, MS is cutting off support for 7 in 2020. I think it's the beginning or middle of January. Been getting these notifications on my machine here that say, by the way, we're cutting off support in 2020, so you want to make sure and upgrade to 10. And normally that would be a good idea regardless, but the fact that I can't use my license for Rhino on a version higher than 7 means I have to buy the regular commercial license for Rhino. And the problem with that is it's $1,000. It is almost exactly $1,000 for the commercial version of Rhino. And that's a big expense. That's not a trivial amount of money for just a piece of software. But I use Rhino almost daily for the work that I do. And I think having worked with that software for as long as I have, it's a worthwhile investment. It's just one I've been putting off for a long time because it's, again, a lot of money to drop just on a program. But I won't have much of a choice once the support cuts off. I don't want to run the risk of trying to use my machine on an unsupported, unsecured, old OS. That sounds like just a recipe for disaster. So depending on how finances work out towards the end of the calendar year in 19, I'm probably going to look at buying the Rhino license sooner than later. Hopefully I can have everything installed and upgraded by the time the new year rolls around. I suppose if I can budget enough for some new computer parts, it might not be a bad idea to upgrade some of the core parts of my PC build. I've been running this one for a few years. I think it's been at least 3 years on this particular set of parts. Again, nothing really wrong with it, but if I'm going to be in there reformatting all the system stuff and installing a new OS, maybe I can justify upgrading some of the central parts and maybe get a new graphics card finally. We'll see. Going back to our mecha design here, the lower body is finished. I went with this sort of narrow, sectioned off, segmented lower torso. And now we can move on to the arms. We'll do the left arm. What I do for these, as you could probably tell from the template in the back, I draw the left arm and I mirror it and fit it into place among the layers on the right side. So far that has been the most efficient way to do that, to ensure that I do get things to maintain their symmetry, and it saves me the time of having to redraw a whole nother arm. But for this one, I do like the idea of sort of bulky shoulders, but also that kind of sharp ridge-like design on the head. What we'll do is we'll rough in the details and then clean things up as we go. The shoulder pieces and the upper and lower parts of the arm are all in this one directory for the arms. I could make the shoulders a separate layer too, but in most cases that wouldn't really matter. Another reason why I originally started doing this project, the majority of these designs with the individual folders and layers, was so I could mess around with animation. If anyone has tuned into my streams and seen the very, very, very rare occurrence where I pick up a new follower, I created an animated version of the Brigandine in the back, the very first mecha design, and I created an animated version of that sprite to use as the follower and subscription alert. I don't think I've ever seen anybody subscribe to my Twitch channel before, but it's the same animation, I believe. No, I'm lying. I know I used a different one. I used a different Sprite animated GIF for the subscriber notification. But creating things on different layers like we've done here makes animation easy. At least I can move different sections of the overall sprite in different directions or in different frame increments, and then just save the render of each frame and then slap it all together into an animated GIF. And that's still kind of a tedious process. I'm learning real quickly as I do these pixel type designs that people who do work for video games or other animation, sprite-based animation is a lot of work. I can definitely see why a lot of companies, especially gaming companies, are moving towards 3D models, vice the old school animated 2D sprites, because that's a lot of work. You can't automate a lot of stuff when it's sprite based. You're essentially doing every minute movement frame by frame, and people who do that still, companies like Lab Zero with Skullgirls, doing hand-drawn sprites with tons of animation frames is a huge task, and I respect people who do that and maintain that art style quite a bit. It's a lot of work. But for the shoulder piece here, I'm just making sure the edges and the line work is clean. For these mecha designs, unlike the regular pixel sprites that I've shown on the channel so far, I do the cleanup for the line work piece by piece rather than all at once, just because it's easier to see the details as I'm working. Rather than do things in piecemeal where I do the line work, coloring, and shading for one piece and then move on, I do each major phase all at once. In other words, I do the line work all at once, then I do the color assignment all at once, and then I do the shading all at once. And I do it part by part. Working down the forearm here, I'm just thinking about how I want to do the hands. This thing, the Brigandine template in the back, has very long arms. This one is going to be a little bit shorter. The forearms and fingers are going to go all the way down to the knees, the quote-unquote knees. This one's going to be a little bit more evenly proportioned, I think. And usually I'll go with 3 fingers. 3 fingers and a thumb. The Brigandine base template underneath has 2 fingers and a thumb. We'll do 3 for this one. The sections of the fingers here to create a little bit of texture. And I think that'll do for the hand. I guess what we can do to keep in line with the whole sharp-edged theme of the head and the shoulder, and put some spikes or blades on the outer edges of the forearm. I do that a lot on my designs. The template model in the back had that to some extent too, but we'll just put a couple accent lines on this one, and then I think that'll work. add some texture lines on the shoulder. That should do it. And if we hide the base template, we can see what we've done so far. Overall, I think it's coming together decently. We can move on to the legs next. Much like the arms that I mentioned before, the way I do the legs is I will do the left one, and then I will mirror it and make some alterations to the right one to get the perspective right. And let's see, I just saw a section as I was scrolling down on the arm that I need to fix. I think it was this one. Alright. Left leg first. Guess we could go. This part right here you see with my cursor is the hip joint. That's the part that connects the legs to the lower torso. And we could do something like this. One of the consistent themes to these particular designs that I just started doing from the beginning and has become kind of consistent would be these stilt-like blade legs. I don't have a more fancy term for them, but a lot of these have these multi-plated single pieces that they balance on, as opposed to regular legs with feet. I mostly did that as a style choice. I don't know where the idea came from, really. I have seen some mecha designs from things like Zone of the Enders that don't really have feet. They're more like balancing struts that the mechs kind of use to stand on, and a lot of times they're airborne anyway, so they're not spending a whole lot of time on the ground. The Armored Core series has actual feet on most of their mechs. I know it doesn't come from there, but I've also done designs in this particular series that have regular feet too, so it's mostly just a style choice. What we can do is clean up the line work on the leg. We'll hide the lower body so we can make sure the joint sections near the hip are cleaned up. And then we'll be getting close to the end of the line work phase. As you can imagine, just looking at the clock on the recording here, the mecha designs have the potential to take a bit longer than a lot of the other pixel sprites, depending on how complex of an idea I'm trying to work through. Sometimes these can take a little bit longer, and I anticipated that for this particular video, so what I may end up doing, just to break things up a little bit, is do this in two parts. The creation of the regular mecha design will be part 1, and the customization part will be the second one, part 2. That might make the overall amount of content a little bit easier to digest. I have gotten the question before about how I choose to divide up my videos. Sometimes things like the Let's Play videos will be between 10 and 15 minutes in length, or for something like the Monster Hunter series, there be 20 minutes in length, a little bit longer episodes, and there's no real rhyme or reason. I mostly just choose the length of the videos depending on the content. For the art videos and the drawing commentary videos, I really don't care how long those take. If they're super long, then I might break them up into more than one part. But for the most part, I'm not too concerned with trying to break up smaller micro episodes when it's just me talking while drawing. I think it's pretty normal for artists drawing videos to run a little bit longer in that case. But the Let's Plays just depends on how the content's paced. I'm not terribly concerned with hitting 10-minute limits on videos because I'm not able to monetize anything I do on this channel. So for me, it's more just trying to feel out what makes for a good pace of content. Alright. I think that'll do it for the left leg. What I'll do now is mirror it over to the right side and then draw in the details for the right, since the perspective's not going to be just a straight mirror. At least not with these particular types of legs. Fortunately, let's see, we're here. Fortunately, because we're working in Photoshop and we're working on layers, doing things like mirroring or copying things is pretty easy. What I can't do effectively, at least with the way Photoshop is configured on right now, what I can't do is mess around with scaling of things too well. I don't know if it's because I've got it set up to scale at the pixel level or what, but if I try and rotate or scale up a series of line works that I do for the sprites, they get all messed up and the detail changes and it overall doesn't look too good. I assume it's because I'm working on things at a pixel by pixel level, so when you translate it, you can't necessarily move everything one for one. Therefore, it messes up the pixels, which is fine. That's not a huge deal. When I upgrade to a more modern version of Photoshop, I might have to look around in the settings to see if that's just the way the program works, or if I can configure things differently to make it so that that's not an issue. Because if I could scale things without having it lose pixels and lose the actual parts of the design, that would be very handy. But not necessarily a deal breaker for this type of work. I get the feeling I'll have to learn a lot of new interface things when I eventually upgrade to the current version of Photoshop. I just don't want it to affect my design work. In fact, I may have that problem with Rhinoceros too when I upgrade to that, since I don't know what the current version looks like. I've been using an older iteration for many years, probably almost 10 years. That's going to be a challenge too. What I've done here, as I was talking, is simply just change the perspective of the right leg that we're looking at here. Instead of it being a mirror image, this one is a bit more side profile, which isn't a big deal. All I had to do was essentially shift the way the perspective looks over slightly to the side instead of being a bit more head-on like the left leg. And moving further down, the right lower leg, with the balancing strut here thing on the bottom, is a bit more at a side profile. This one right here will be like you're looking at head-on. This one will be looking at it more for the side. I found that helps to not make the perspective weird. Sometimes I'll have legs that work fine mirrored completely around the lower body and they don't look strange. But some of these look better for a 3/4 and then a 3/4 side profile. But I think we are just about done with the line work. I think I need to fix the left leg slightly here. This lower part, I don't know if I'd call that a toe, but the lower part of the leg actually comes up instead of down. Man, that works a little bit better. And then I can move the outer edges out just a little bit. And that should do it. Alright, let's zoom out a little bit and see where we're at with the design so far. What I will do on my other screen here is pull up some of the recent designs and see. I did do one a couple streams ago that has a kind of similar looking head. I guess I can pull this one over. I'm not trying to keep anything that I do a secret. I just won't be posting this one for a while. This should show up on the capture. I'll resize the image window here. This one has a really similar looking head. Instead of going up like the one we're working on here, this one goes out a little bit more. But I don't think it's so close that I have to change the one we're working on. The rest of this particular design just happened to stick out in my mind. Everything else on here I think is pretty unique. So I think we're good to go on to the color assignment phase, which this is going to go much faster. The line work probably takes the most amount of time out of all the steps in the process for these.